staff hearing officer meeting of July 29, 2009 to order. Is there anyone here from the public wishing to speak on anything not on today's agenda? Not hearing anyone. I'll close public comment. Are there any changes to the agenda we need to announce?
Number C was postponed.
Okay, so anyone here for item C for 2050 Garden Street, 314 East Padre Street, that item has been postponed, just for your information. Do we have a date for that?
April 12th.
April 12th. Next?
No, not April, August.
August 12th. Just to let you know. Okay. That will hear the first item, 920 North Aliso Street. Come forward. Morning.
Morning.
Can you identify yourself for the record?
I'm Mark Mirando, agent for the owner, Angela Hamilton. On my
Okay.
left.
Why don't I read what the application is for? Do you want to summarize that? Okay. The application is for a request for a zoning modification at 920 North Aliso Street. The discretionary application required for this project is modifications to allow an as-built 68 square foot bedroom addition, laundry cabinet, and water heater enclosure to be located within the interior yard setbacks, and open yard areas and parking within the front interior setbacks. So multiple zoning applications. If you can walk me through those modifications.
Thank you very much. The project site is just over 2,000 square feet, so very small, zoned R2 residential. Configuration of the lot, kind of triangular here in the back. Aliso Street in the front. Current development on site consists of a single-family residence of about, what records showed originally was about 578 square feet. At some point over time, and conflicting records, old aerial photos were used to try to make a determination. It appears that the floor area was filled in back here. About 68 square feet had been added. Also, a large deck out here, and then some storage cabinets on the side of the property. It also indicated, the record check, that an old one-car garage that was previously located somewhere here in this backyard area had been removed at some point in time, and the parking had been replaced on a slab here in the front and interior yard setbacks. Upon completion of a recent zoning information report that was prepared by staff, these violations came to the property owner's attention, who is trying to sell the property and wants to clear the violations prior to that transfer of ownership. They're asking for a modification for the following items. The addition here of this, which is now a bedroom, which is located within both the interior and the non-conforming open yard area. The rear deck is going to be removed, and in its place will just be a small landing with stairs, which will access the yard off the raised foundation of the house. And over here, the water heater enclosure that currently exists, and to provide a replacement storage structure here with a washer dryer, although I understand that may change during the review of this morning's meeting. These alterations do occur within what was already a non-conforming open yard, and this bedroom, as you can see, a very small portion of it is actually located within the rear yard setback. I'll come back to the parking issue. Typically, staff discourages the use of the modification process for legalization of illegal construction. However, in considering this project and these requests, we really took into consideration the shape of the lot, the major site constraints associated with it, the fact that the most immediate neighbor, who I believe we received a letter of support from this morning, has a garage right there on the property line.
This neighbor.
Okay, because they had a Carrillo Street address. That would be this neighbor. Okay, then I stand corrected. Also consider where the necessity, the deck here in the back, even though it's in the open yard, the landing and stairs, that's necessary to access the rear yard area from inside the house because of the raised foundation. The storage cabinet here, or as it's proposed right here, is just going to enclose a washer dryer, an amenity that's definitely an appropriate improvement for a single family residence, and of course the water heater for that same reason.
Okay.
As far as the parking being located in the front, during the course of time and maybe proper identification of the rear lot line, the neighbor's construction of a garage wouldn't have allowed for a garage to function in this area anymore. Plus, placing the garage or the actually uncovered parking in the front opens this area back up to be used as an open yard as intended by the ordinance. The front yard parking location is consistent with the pattern of development throughout the neighborhood, as well as having the space uncovered. Staff is asking for approval of this project as submitted for the modifications of parking in the front and interior yards, and to allow as-built additions and alterations within not only the rear yard setback, but the non-conforming open yard area. We feel that these modifications will secure appropriate improvements. It doesn't really intensify the use on the property, just making that small single-family residence more usable.
Okay, I'd like to hear from the applicants now.
Good morning, Mr. Morning. Roxanne pretty much did a good job on what I was going to do. Just trying to give you some background, basically.
The mic is on, maybe a little closer. There you go.
Basically, this bedroom addition is 68 square feet, and the house is 578, so it's a little over 600. There's a gable that runs from the front to the back at this point, and then it's a shed roof. And originally, the sandboard map, when Angela bought it in 1998, her zoning information report said that the house was legal and the uncovered parking space was legal.
What year was that?
In 98.
Okay.
And since the inception of ZIRs in 76, there was 3 other zoning reports, one in 79, one in 81, and one in 1987, that all said that the house and the uncovered parking space were not conforming to the lot. And going back when Jenny Howard did the zoning information report in 2009, she used the sandboard map, and you can see this old one-car garage here in the back. And you can see this area here was shown as legal on the sandboard. If you go underneath the foundation, this is all the original Doug Fir tongue and groove 1-inch flooring nominal that comes to this point, and then there's a concrete stoop that accesses the back here. So looking at the aerial photographs from the 20s, 30s, 50s, and 70s, you can see that in the 20s the garage was here. The house, we don't even know when it was built, probably in the early 1900s. And the lot behind it was vacant, and then in 67 when they developed this lot, they graded it, and I believe that the garage was actually spanned their lot, so they demoed it in 67 at that time. And in 71, we have county assessor tax records that call out this square footage as existing. And one of the things that it says in 79 when the house sold and they appraised it, the assessor said, exterior inspection only, ugly, no appeal, no yard, concrete slab for parking, no garage, back of house is 3 to 4 feet away from neighbor's house. So when this garage was built, it was built right on the property line, and it's about 3 feet 1 inch away. And you know, it's going to meet fire code. We're going to rebuild the foundation underneath it and pretty much rebuild that portion of the dwelling to meet new code now. And when she bought the property, the only violation was a storage shed in the interior yard back here, which has been removed. And there is a little deck. This is the aerial photograph where you can see the garage was back there in 55. Right back here you can see the gable running right behind the house right there. This is the dwelling itself, and that's the gable, and this is the lot was vacant in 55. And this is the situation at the rear yard. That's the corner of the dwelling, and that's the garage, looking obliquely this way like a photograph. That's the front of the dwelling. This is in the back. One of the other violations that was mentioned on the other reports was that this deck was a couple inches over height, and it has this washer-dryer exterior kind of cabinet that sits here side by side. And instead of keeping this storage unit here and then expanding a little bit as we proposed on Rox's plan, we were going to propose it back here because it makes more sense, because just walking around the corner here it'd take up even more yard, and for drainage as well. So we like to put it next to the new stairwell, and you can see on the elevations how that works out. It's going to fit just barely. You know, so basically the justification for the bedroom is in the parking spot. The parking spot is 28 feet 7 inches long. It's required to be 20 feet long. So this 8'7" by 8'7" is 74 square feet, which kind of replaces the 68 square feet here with a few extra. And the water heater, you know, in the past they would even allow them in interior setbacks. We don't necessarily want to move it because it's connected to the bathroom and it works really well and it's there. And the washer dryer, we'd be willing to remove this portion to have it located back here where it's going to work better. The stairway is configured to meet 2887-062, which allows it to go 3 feet into the setback, coming from the first floor of a unit. So, you know, it's meeting minimum building code with the landing and, you know, 7-inch risers, 11-inch treads. And the parking space itself also is the predominant pattern of development in the neighborhood. The neighbor right here has 2 uncovered parking spaces. And also 1 door up right on the corner of the pie-shaped Alisos before it hits Korea Road is Pintor's, and in 2006 they were granted a modification to leave their uncovered parking space right there. It used to have a dilapidated carport that was removed, and they granted a mod to leave it uncovered. There are some pictures in the file of that. And additionally, across the street on the corner as Korea comes down, there's a 1-car carport right on the property line. And then 2 of the neighbors right across the street. The one directly across the street has a 2-car garage facing the street. And then the other 2 on each side of it have the original like Model A, you know, 9 by 18 garages that sit right back in the back property line on both corners, interior and rear. Let's see. The bedroom itself, the interior setbacks were separation for odors and privacy. This is provided by this 14-foot high garage wall. The actual expansion was done in an historical manner in that it's subordinate to the main house and that they used the shed roof and they basically just filled in the remaining portion that was there. You know, the exterior water heater enclosure and the relocation of the washer dryer are just small amenities that provide, you know, necessary improvements for the property for this thing to function, and they're designed to fit with the function of the house as well. And basically what you're losing in open yard is 26 square feet from the beginning of the project to the end, which is about 3.5–4% of the existing open yard. The other violations being overheight fence. It's like 2-by pickets, which are 4 feet high, and code's 3.5. So we'll just cut them right at the rail, so it'll still look good. It'll still have like an inch over the top rail. This fence here right now is at 17 feet, so we're going to move it back to 20. And this actual slab portion here that we're capturing for open yard is pretty much the only usable open yard on the lot. There's 2 French doors, which are pretty much the only thing Angela's done other than interior. It's the only exterior improvement, and that opens the living room right out onto this amenity, which is where there's a little table, and the yard's kind of slopes down. If you want to look at the elevations real quick.
No, I visited the site,
Okay.
so I'm familiar with it. So
All
does
right.
that conclude your presentation?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. That was very thorough. I'm going to open public comment. Is there anyone here from the public wishing to speak on this project? Hearing no one, I will close public comment. Now I do have some questions for you and staff.
We do have public comment here.
Oh, we do have a letter submitted, as you noted, from the neighbor. Angela Hamilton is the applicant. Who's this neighbor? This is Hillary Brace and Roland Fortier. Neighbors saying that
The
they
neighbor said they reside here.
support the project. So that's...
Yeah, it's this neighbor here.
Okay.
This is her.
Well, speaking about neighbors, have you had any contact with this neighbor to the rear? This one here?
No.
No mention. Did you share the project design with them? Are they aware? I assume that we noticed them, right?
They were noticed, but we have not been in contact with them.
Okay. All right. So that's for the record. We have a letter there. So I have a series of questions I'd like to ask. The first question is, Do you actually use the parking space here now? Is it functional for you? Do you or use it
Rarely.
So you primarily park in front of the street, right? So by increasing the depth, obviously you'd be more likely to use it, I would assume, right?
For parking?
For parking, that's the...
I would prefer to have it, to use this more as yard.
Okay, so you're sort of objecting the fact that you're going to lose some yard in order to get the depth.
Yes.
The reality is, okay. You understand that that's part of the proposal to sort of justify the parking to be there. You're sort of fixing a long-term problem, which is you don't have a parking space, and we're trying to allocate some space there for you to park. So that's the intent there, to try to make it more usable. So you just have to understand that that's part of the modification, that that's technically where you're supposed to park if you're going to park a vehicle. So we're going to try to make it more usable by relocating this fence, right?
Right, we're going to relocate it to 20 feet for
Okay.
transportation,
Okay.
but we would, we could expand it this way to make it more usable, would make it easier to turn in and out rather than lengthening it.
Well, we just want to make it safe, right, to get in and out. And so that's part of the reduction of the fencing, right, to make it more usable to get in and out. And so I'm just more concerned about making sure the property owner feels it's safe to use. And I see some overgrowth in fence. Just make sure that we can try to get that more functional for you. Okay. I have a question now on the washer and dryer. Right now, the current location is where that you wash on the floor plan.
Right here.
That's it right now?
Yeah, currently it sits on a rear
It's not
deck.
shown right now.
No, actually, it sits on a rear deck right here.
Okay.
On the side plan. They're side by side in the picture. They're sitting on the deck on a little cabinet that's about 4 feet high. And I have it right here. This is it right here. So you're
Okay.
looking back at it. You're looking from here and you're seeing the cabinet that sits there and the lid flips up and there's the washer dryer.
So has it always been there for you, that location? Or was
Yes.
that moved? Okay.
So it's on one of the existing elevations right here
Okay.
underneath the kitchen.
So your
window.
proposal now is to maintain that
proposal
location?
now is to basically maintain it, but since the setback is 2 feet in, we're going to put it right here. As the stairs come down,
Okay. It'll be on
it'll
grade.
be 7 feet high, 4 feet by 4 feet wide. So it'll pretty much stick out about a foot from, about 9 inches from that 4x4 post.
Okay. And
And this is the
so
location right here, just out of the setback.
now explain to me, I'd like to have staff explain to me how that change in plan impacts the modifications, if any, that were noticed. for
It
this
would
hearing.
not.
It would not.
Earlier proposal to put it here, replacing it here. They're both in
In the
the
open yard.
non-conforming open yard
Okay.
area.
Okay, good. And with respect to the ZIR history, I think what I wanted to state for the record is that it's very unusual for us to approve an as-built construction of a structure this close to a property line. Just the reality is that we don't really want to do that as far as setting a precedent, right? We don't.
correct.
Is that correct? We haven't really done that in the past. But I understand that there's practical difficulties in cutting that back because, in fact, you have made a case that this is your only bedroom at this point in the home. So we could be very draconian and ask you to clip that and not have a functional bedroom, and I don't
Right.
think that really is the intent of our zoning ordinances. So the fact that it's to the rear of the property, and then we do have a neighbor's garage, which isn't really going to impact that neighbor, as evidenced by the fact that this neighbor is not objecting at this point. We don't have anything on record. So sort of explaining my rationale, I think, for supporting the bedroom encroachment modification with respect to trying to make the findings. I think you've made a very good case showing also the development patterns. I did visit the neighborhood, and we do have a lot of structures that are very close proximity. It's just a very tightly constructed neighborhood with these type of setback patterns. So I think it would be consistent with sort of the type of development that has occurred in the neighborhood. With respect to the parking, again, getting back to where I think you do, again, have demonstrated that there are actual locations in the front yard setback that have been used for parking. And because of the size of the lot, I think that's the only logical location to place parking without ruining your limited open yard space. So I'm inclined to support that modification. Now, with respect to the washer and dryer, this is where I'm having some questions as far as our history of allowing outdoor amenities like this, as far as noise associated with the outdoor improvements. I'd like to hear from staff as far as if we allowed outdoor amenities like this. It's more of an open yard issue rather than an encroachment issue. But,
Correct. And I'm not really aware of the fact that we do this on a routine basis, but the installation outside of the residential floor area was supported due to the size of the residence.
Okay. And, noise associated with that, dryer venting, that type of thing, is just typical. It could be done on the side of the house, too, obviously, and still have that same noise impacts.
Correct. We would probably request some noise measurements for the installation. I personally hadn't thought about that, but that would be something that would be a genuine condition.
No, I'm not interested in the noise analysis. I'm more or less concerned about whether people would object to the location
I think
being put there.
if you look at this side of the lot, do the aerial.
You have the wall there.
This is a huge wall. It goes down about another 20
That's the
feet.
carport line.
It's a carport
Okay.
that works for the house.
Okay.
It's probably like 40 or 50 feet at least to any dwelling.
Okay.
The other dwelling is back here, and there's another structure that sits right here, kind of goes over the property line.
Okay. I think that makes sense, that we won't have that type of complaint, nuisance associated with that. So I'm going to render my decision that we can support the modifications as proposed, that making the findings that the modifications are consistent with the purposes and intent of the zoning ordinance and are necessary to secure appropriate improvements. I think that the proposal is a fair proposal as far as trying to legalize and clean up the property on a very constrained, undersized lot. And I do not believe the intensification impacts will impact the immediate neighbors. Therefore, I do approve this project and wish you well getting some permitting.
Thank you.
And this project is appealable within 10 days to those out in the public that object to this approval. Okay,
All right.
thank you.
Thank you.
All right.
Yeah.
Okay. Let's see. Is it we going to keep that one?
I'm going to take this one.
Okay. Let me go to the next item, which is, next item is 1323 Rialto Lane. Can you step forward? Thank you. How are you? Good. Sit up here. Can you identify yourself for the record, please?
Good morning. I'm David Van Hoy, architect, here with the owners, Nico and Cece Lala. Hopefully somebody's taking care of the kids. We were able to get over here this morning, which is great.
Okay, I'm going to have staff walk through the modifications that are being requested. Let me just announce what the item is here. Okay. Make sure I've got it here.
You want mine?
I got it here. I just need to move it. It is a request for zoning modifications at 1323 Rialto Lane. It is description applications that are required for this project are modifications to permit accessory space in excess of 500 square feet on the lot and to recognize the location of the existing accessory building and alterations within the interior yard setback. So I'll hear from staff on the presentation first.
Thank you very much. Project site out here on Rialto Lane. It's over 15,000 square feet of lot area, developed with a single-family residence and a two-car garage with direct access off the street. The rear yard is improved with a swimming pool, spa, and a detached accessory structure that was actually built with permits, inspected, and signed off in 2003. During the most recent application process with the city, the applicant had a survey prepared that showed, although the plans on file showed the accessory structure at the required 10-foot interior yard setback, it had actually been constructed at about 5 foot, 5.5 feet away. A site visit revealed it'd be very easy to make that mistake. Out in the field, the property line would have been very difficult to identify during the course of construction. So they've added to this application legalization of the existing workshop area at the 5.5 foot that it currently exists at. Due to the topography of the property, the accessory structure sits lower on the property. This application involves the construction of a second-story pool cabana, which, because of the topography, would be at the level of the swimming pool. Staff understands that the 500 square foot limitation of accessory space applies to all single-family lots, whether it's 2,000 or 25,000, and generally feels that a modification of larger amounts can be supportable. However, with this particular application, we really had to look at, is it necessary to have more? In group consultations, we decided that we would take the position that perhaps an amenity to be used with the pool that would provide powder room configuration so that pool users didn't have to go into the residence, with shade to be provided in an area that doesn't currently provide any, could be provided without actually constituting floor area, and are recommending that this application be modified, or the design be modified, to provide square footage under the 500 square feet. That's including the 313 square feet, or excuse me, the 385 square feet that currently exists with the workshop. We understand the workshop, which functions as a workshop, is not able to provide the amenity of a facility to be used in conjunction with the pool, but we also feel that making the required findings that the additional floor area is not necessary to secure the improvement, and that through a design, a shade structure, partially walled with a small powder room could be accomplished and still come into compliance with the 500 square foot limitation. So staff is recommending legalization of the existing structure at its 5.5 foot setback, but asking that the accessory structure does not exceed the accumulative total of 500 square feet, which is the maximum allowed by the code.
Okay. I'd like to hear from the applicant, and more focused, I think, on the compatibility and the justification on why you should get these modifications.
Okay. Essentially, let's start off with the overall objective when we started this project, which is really an existing residence, an existing pool and deck, and you can see in the site section here, again, the residence, the pool, and the site falling off, and the existing workshop. The roof of this workshop, and I'll show you some photos to help you kind of understand that. So that's a photograph of the workshop from the lower level, and here are, this is probably the better one. This is from the pool area, and then this gray area here, we're standing here looking this way, and you see that the roof of the existing workshop is essentially at the same level as the pool deck. The need for, as staff described, some shade and restroom facilities that are near the pool that don't require wet kids and wet adults to traipse through the house to one of these internal bathrooms that exist in the residence. The pool is very tight to the house in terms of looking. The first step is looking at something that would be part of the main residence, so it wouldn't be an accessory building. But you can see with the setbacks on both sides and the small distance between the existing pool and the house, there just really isn't space to put that building. In addition, the family room and living room and so forth that enjoy views into the canyon, would be in the way of that. It seemed obvious, and I think to some degree it was thought of at some point in the future, where we're at now, that there would be an amenity or some structure added to the workshop building that would then service the pool. It actually works quite nicely in real life, and I appreciate Ms. Milazzo visiting the site yesterday. I think you can, as much as we draw, seeing things in person really gives you a good, clear idea about what's going on. So the idea is to clad the workshop and make it quieter as a presence and actually form a base to an open air, primarily openable air, shall we say, shade structure cabana that has a small, if we turn into the next drawing sheet, actually, they're all folded up. So the plan for the cabana is to provide those amenities, a shade structure, which is this dash line, which is the roof, that's accessible directly from the pool, and a small powder area that's all the code minimum dimensions here in the corner. And this is facing Ealing's Park and faces the ocean, you know, the prevailing breezes off the canyon that come from Arroyo Burro Beach. And so the idea is to provide some tunable sliding glass panels around the perimeter, essentially a series of sliding glass doors that would provide some ability to close off this area if the wind's coming from this direction and so forth, and make it a little more habitable year round, shall we say. So we felt constrained to this solution, but we didn't ignore looking at other opportunities to provide this amenity for the family. Again, if this were to go forward and this square footage would be added to the site, the total would be about 66% of the NPO maximum. We're about 1,300 square feet below the development potential for this site on the, you know, in terms of the NPO ordinance. So it's 198 square feet over the 500 square foot threshold for accessory buildings on a 15,000 square foot site. Other properties in the area are of similar size, and if we go back to the cover sheet and look at a couple of exhibits here. Oh, you got the nice color one. Fancy. You can see that the main structure is here. You can see that little square where the existing workshop building is. You see photographs down here taken from the neighborhood. The only two places that we were able to see it was down here. You see a little, I had to note it there, you see one little corner from that street, and as you're looking through here, you can see one little corner of it. You see the homes are quite a distance away, and it seemed like a good solution to place that building, not only because the workshop was already there, but because it was very, very private and it didn't impact the neighbors. The design also is glass on three sides for light and air, and it was also purposely solid on this side because there's a sort of a boomerang-shaped home on the opposite side of this site enjoying those same views, and so that this provides privacy for that residence and provides views from this residence. So the compatibility across the property line, we feel, is again a good solution for that area. This is a photograph actually standing on the roof deck of the workshop, looking back at the house, and you see the amount of vegetation and so forth that exists along this property line. Looking at and reading the ordinance for the first time in several years, just looking at it for modifications, I think you really, you really want to not set a precedent. We have to have a unique set of circumstances to be able to even come in here with a straight face and ask for something that's a little bit different than what the basic code asks for and specifies. And we don't take that lightly. We do look for solutions that don't require this process. However, this one really, the logical best design solution, good planning solution, I personally feel is what we're presenting. Necessary to secure an appropriate improvement. Certainly a shade structure and a restroom next to a pool seems to be logical. There aren't a lot of other opportunities, as I've explained, to do so. Prevent unreasonable hardship, that's up to you guys. Not detrimental to the public welfare. We've met with, certainly noticed the neighborhood, had good meetings with face-to-face with a couple of the neighbors, and in addition to that, it worked out and had opened a dialogue for some additional landscaping, potentially on the south part of the site to make that property line happier. Some screening between the neighbor to the west, essentially, for the same reasons, and so that dialogue has resulted in negotiating and getting good property line, happy property lines on both sides. At the end of the day, it seems that this really comes down to these glass panels. If these glass panels are here and make this building more usable, it becomes square footage. If these glass panels are not there, it's not square footage, and we don't have to have this meeting. So, and we would still get, admittedly, the shade structure the deck and the powder room, which would be a great improvement and really help the family. So it seems to me that we're really looking at something that got very good at this same table a couple of months ago. Very positive comments from Single Family Design Board. There are we've built a model of it that's on the first sheet if you're interested. And so it really comes down to how year-round usage of this structure it can be accomplished with or without those glass panels.
Okay. I'm going to open up public comment at this point. Is there anyone here to comment on this project? Hearing no one, I'll close the public comment. We do have a letter. Sheila or Paula Westbury, basically saying objecting, right?
Correct.
Okay, to the project.
Just if I may, to her letter, we are not tearing the pool out and we're not tearing the workshop down. We're keeping everything that's there and adding a very lightweight structure on the up above the workshop at the same level as the pool. So I just want to make that really clear for her benefit.
Okay. Let's see. I do have some questions here on this project. I'd like to hear a little bit about what went wrong with the construction in 2003 as far as why the property lines were not identified. And I want to know from the owners if you had a licensed contractor associated with that project, accessory building, or who built that structure? Is it owner-builder? Or?
Owner-builder, my father helped build it. And
Were you involved with the construction also?
someone involved too, yes.
Were you aware of the setback requirement?
No, we were not aware.
So did you have an approved set of plans, correct?
Yes, everything was approved, and we had an engineer, we had an architect.
That there was actually a physical layout to measure to a specific site
Yes.
location, and you were using a hedge, a fence? What were you using?
There's nothing really there. We're just going on what was existing there.
Is there?
May I comment?
Sure.
I was around. I wasn't involved with the construction, obviously, except I do recall that we've had a couple of property, what are they called?
Surveys.
Survey, we had a survey.
And this last property survey that we did was different than the first property survey. So I don't know exactly what they did to measure and how they built the workshop where it is. But I do know that that first property survey, they had a really difficult time finding the markings
Okay.
to actually do, to actually find the real property line.
Okay.
If I may, to that, yeah. When I became involved in this project to look at this, the previous survey was a survey that was it was a survey. It had property lines and buildings, but not a lot of information, and really not enough information topographically to start to really craft this project. And so I requested a proper survey. And Ken Simpson, a longtime second generation surveyor in town, prepared that survey, which is in this set, very detailed, and actually mentioned that this whole tract, the Bel Air Knolls tract, when it was laid out, eventually, you've got these sort of curvy streets on topography. It's sort of well known around town in the survey community that it's a bit more than a bit sketchy in terms of property descriptions matching what's really on the ground and so forth. And so he did a lot of work to take this actually back to some points quite a bit off-site and really narrow it down, because he'd worked in this neighborhood before. And so I feel very good about where we ended up. Also, when you see, Ms. Milazzo saw this yesterday, that the property line where it is, and when you see, it's very rural out there, and so there's just a bunch of, and there's another fence that's actually about 5 feet over from the actual property line, which that might have been confused when that was constructed. I don't know if the term honest mistake qualifies, but it's certainly confusing out there.
Okay. I thought I'd need to know that in order to make some discussions about that setback issue. And then I'd like to hear from staff about accessory buildings and how common it is for us to approve essentially 2-level accessory. Is that what the concern was about the size? Because I see from the staff report that you're supportive of the encroachment, but not supportive of the size, and you're asking for some type of reduction in the size. And I'm wondering, is it because of the two-story nature of it, or just the fact that it's size? You don't care that it's two-story; it's more.
Two-story accessory structures are allowed.
But how common is it to get a two-story accessory structure approved over 500 square feet? That's
Fairly common.
Okay.
And typically on lots of this area, it's not unusual to see and to support modification requests. We've recently received criticisms on our generosity with the modifications that we've been supporting and granting, and we are being more critical with the requests that come before us. We were hoping there was a conforming design change that would allow this project to proceed, provide them with what they needed, a shade structure with a powder room that would not require a modification approval.
Okay. The other question I have for the applicants is, this lower space, you're saying it's a workshop. What's currently happening in that space?
That's the workshop.
Is
Compressed
it
with-
storage, or do you actually go in there and do workshop?
Yes.
Because people can have it for storage.
I mean, there's old bikes stored. There's an old car that I'm working on that's there, and
So you have a
More-
vehicle that you can
Yes.
use? Okay, and so that vehicle access is also part of that storage almost, right? You have the access that goes down to this area?
There's a little rubble path to get down there.
It's not being used as a garage. It's a workshop, a restoration operation.
But you can get a vehicle down there?
Yes, there is no curb cut, but there is a rock pathway that
Okay.
could be
plan
used.
every day. But once I can make a car go down there and
Okay.
do the work I have to do.
But Nico, restores motorcycles, bicycles, really cool old kids' cars,
cars.
and that sort of thing down in that workshop.
Okay. Well, I'm asking questions because I am going to make some type of conclusion on this, and I'm going to get at all the facts. So, and with respect to compatibility of a two-story structure, one of the things that I, as a staff hearing officer, need to conclude is that there is a development pattern or some type of consistency with the neighborhood. And typically, when we get something that is either too close to a property line, you have to sort of figure out whether or not it would be compatible to the degree it is being proposed. And so what I'm getting at with asking staff the question about two-story structures, although half of the structure is dug in, there is a two-story element to it. So what would be a precedent would be to establish two-story pool houses in this neighborhood. I don't know how many pools there are in the neighborhood, but the idea of making a case for other structures, either in the neighborhood or through the city have approved. And I don't know if I had that presented because it's, I guess, an unusual and unique situation. We don't normally have accessory buildings built this close to the property. So I'm struggling with that issue. And then where I was leading to is I actually have more of an issue with the proximity issue. That we, not unlike the previous application where you have a very constrained site, we had plenty of space to get this right. We don't have a situation. There might have been an issue with property lines and not identifying. I think the process broke down. The inspector should have asked for a survey and identified that property line correctly and not allowed that construction to happen. I don't know if, again, you all as the property owners contributed to that by not insisting that we get that dimension correctly. But I don't like the idea of that encroaching. So where I'm heading with this is, since we have sort of a dilemma with the size, why contribute to that situation and allow that size issue to be an issue? Why not propose your cabana as proposed and eliminate the size and encroachment issue with some type of demolition or filling in of that area to reduce that? I think that's my tendency to try to develop a win-win situation, which is what you want really is your cabana, and you might have to sacrifice some area in your workshop to get it. Because I'm not inclined to recommend approval of the size of the cabana with the associated workshop. So I'm going to ask the applicants and your architect is if you are interested in a redesign that would accomplish that, which is trying to fill some of that workshop bit. So maybe you can eliminate or get closer to the 500 square foot size
Just talking, going down that road for a moment, I think, agreed, I think we would either reduce size, let's just say for sake of discussion that this moves in or this becomes unusable, and maybe to be able to get a vehicle in there to be able to work on and restore, that it has to grow out that direction, a similar.
No, that's not what
Similar
that's not what I'm talking about. I'm
Yeah.
talking about just reducing it. That there are some things of give and take, and you could propose that, but I don't think that achieves the reduction in the overall size that we want to see, which is not to exceed the 500 square foot maximum.
Well, and mathematically, if this were removed, we would still be above 500, but less so.
Okay, how close? I mean, so if you remove 4 feet off the back, 3 feet.
Just got a scale around
Also,
here.
this serves as a retaining wall. It's the whole hill is held up.
I'm not saying you demo it. I'm saying you keep it in place. You build another wall so it's not functional, usable space.
wall
You
it
fill
off.
it in.
Yeah, so that's 20 by, it's about 80 square feet, so we'd be still, 100 square feet over or something like that.
And does this area all have to be glassed in? I mean, can you do a combination of it being open versus, let me bring back the glass here and in and out?
It gets rather, yes, physically, yes. I mean, functionally, it sort of becomes sort of odd.
Really windy up there. That's the whole thing of having these glass windows to where it's hot and there's no wind. We can open them up and have a nice open space. But even sometimes in the summertime, we're up on the hill there where it's really windy. Just to be able, when you get out of the pool and you're soaking wet, and the kids, you bring them in there where you have some protection from that, be able to dry them out, hang out a little bit. And it's the whole
Okay,
thing
well,
of-
what I'm trying to do is
understand.
have a working session here to try to follow through on what I hear staff doing, requesting is a redesign. So I was anticipating you having ideas about how you would accomplish it. Or you could choose to, again, ask for a denial and take that up to the Planning Commission. The Planning Commission might be inclined to see fit that the size is appropriate. I'm struggling with the fact that you have a problem that you're trying to fix, which is appreciative, but I don't think that should be compounded with additional improvements on top of that structure without correcting something. And I don't see a proposal to correct anything, either from a size issue or from an encroachment issue. And so I'd like to see something from that, some alternative proposal that would accomplish that. And I realize the history of whose mistake or who you weren't purposeful in making that mistake on the encroachment issue. But I'd like to see it somewhat corrected as part of this proposal. There's another investment into the property being proposed, and there's I think a desire to make something. You're going to spend money in order, so I think you should do something to make it more in compliance. And I don't see that effort being made.
Well, how does the process move forward from here? That's probably not a decision that we're prepared to make
Okay.
at the table here. Is this something we
What
can continue
typically
and-
if you know that I'm not prepared to approve the modification, you can ask for a continuance with a redesign. You can come back and work with staff on some other solution that we can feel more supportive of it. Or you can ask for a denial, and we would make a denial finding today, and you could appeal that to the Planning Commission and take your
Yeah,
chances.
I'm not interested in piling on with their workload of appeals from this.
Well, I just want to make sure
I
that
would like
the
to,
applicants know that they overrule staff. I mean, they have the authority to
Oh, yeah.
to come in and weigh in.
One question, if the applicant were able to open up the majority of this area, not have it enclosed, just a partial enclosure, and it did no longer constitute floor area, are you willing to approve the existing lower level workshop that was constructed within the setback? If they don't need a modification for floor area?
I think the issue is traditionally, I think what we have done with these is we're always concerned about them being enclosed at a later date. And I don't want to play any games about, whether I was asking whether you could reduce it to a point where it could be combined with a reduction downstairs to get within the allowable.
Right.
That's what my motivation was.
If I may, I would like to get clear officially here that if we again, going down a different road, if these glass panels were completely removed and we have basically a wall and a roof and 3 sites open, we have, a room here for privacy, so that's clearly square footage. But in my understanding is that is not square footage, and therefore no longer, a mod is no longer needed. And the garage is permitted and signed off and everything from the city already. Is that the
I
case?
think the garage does need a modification for its location. It was signed off in error. It was constructed in error off misinformation. This application does include a request to legalize its location at 5 feet from the setback.
Right, and I understand that. In terms of your deliberations in your own mind, if this were completely opened up and it becomes more of a, I don't know, it becomes completely open air basically, and I think it still would benefit the project and the neighbor especially to have this more solid on this backside. But if that were removed and it were not square footage, then would that fly in your mind?
I'm still getting back to my first comment about have you demonstrated that this type of structure is found in the city? I mean, are there other examples of this type of structure being approved? And I have a lot of experience reviewing projects, and I don't see a lot of two-story pool cabanas just because of the reality. And you have a step condition here, and you're taking advantage of a structure to place this pool. So it does make sense to put the pool cabana at this level. I'm not disputing that. I'm just having a problem with trying to deal with that workshop when you're asking for this size structure. I don't know if that would circumvent our intent to, let's just say, condition it in a way that it just remains open and it's not square footage. I mean, you basically get the same structure.
It would no longer need a modification for accessory floor area, though.
Right.
We do understand
But
that.
you don't have a problem with that encroachment per se?
It was there. It hasn't appeared to be a nuisance.
Okay.
To require the demolition, I understand what the trade-off would be, but if they were just applying to legalize that now that it has come to our attention, that it was constructed in the setback, and then to provide a shade structure on the roof with a small powder room, which would not exceed accessory on-site in excess of 500 square feet, would that be a modification you would be willing to support?
Okay, I'm asking staff, you would support that encroachment then?
Yes,
Okay.
we are asking for support of that existing floor area.
Okay.
Also, if I may say something, this encroachment is also below level of any other neighbors, so it's not the same level. There's no way it would affect anybody around that area in any way.
Yeah, that's a good point. The neighbor's yard
And we are
actually
stepping back
is
away.
above the level of the roof of this.
And heavy vegetation at the bottom of the property screens it from the lower neighbor.
Well, I guess you're convincing me that if you do something to the design, I think I could support the justification of it. Now, what I'm a little reluctant to do is try to redline it here. I mean, is that what you're trying to do?
Well, I think we would, and one point, and then I'll answer that question. Actually, interestingly enough, with your rules of, this is a full retaining wall. This is a full retaining wall stepping down to almost no retaining wall and then open. So more, the rule about more than 50% of the building being having. If it's less than 4 feet above between grade and the ceiling and all that sort of thing, this actually qualifies as a basement under your NPO ordinance. And so relative to grade and that sort of, if that helps you understand it, it really is into the ground relative to...
No, I understand it's into the ground.
Right. It said the other part, I think we have talked about options, and I think if it was conditioned that there would be no glass panels around the three sides of the building, and that would be the only change to what's presented, I think that's acceptable to the owners.
Okay. If that's what you're willing to do, I think what would be the condition would be that the cabana not be enclosed. I mean, I don't have a problem with, let's say, putting some type of windscreen. Is that would be acceptable?
Yeah,
Balcony
and we'll definitely need a handrail here.
Handrail.
Yeah. So that would be acceptable, but not totally enclosing it, I think, is the compromise that we find acceptable. Does that work with you? Okay.
And specifically, guardrail where required, but no enclosure other than this back wall for...
Right.
Okay.
So that would be a condition of approval that we would place on the project. Okay. And I want to stress that we do want the setbacks measured this time, so we don't want any problems with where
Well, we've got that
Survey.
very precise, and,
Okay.
and the that wall is in board of the setback.
Okay.
For any new construction, for sure.
Okay. So I guess that's where we resolved it. Where we are going to approve this project, where I am, with a modification to change the plan with this condition that the area not be totally enclosed, the new pool cabana. That I find that the modification is necessary to be consistent with the zoning ordinance and necessary to secure appropriate improvement on the property, and find that there are unique topography conditions on the site that allow this encroachment to remain below grade for the workshop, and that I thank the applicants for asking for allowing some modification to try to meet the intent of the ordinance, which is to limit the accessory space. So you're approved with those
Okay,
conditions.
great. It's a good discussion. We appreciate
Okay.
your time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. We're going to wait a minute till we get our staff member down here on this project.
The applicant just stepped out to the hall. He's here.
Morning. Morning. Can you identify yourself for the record?
Accepting James Graham.
You are the applicant for this project. Okay. This application is for 631 Olive Street. It's for a proposal to change the use of a existing residence, in order to establish a medical cannabis dispensary at 631 Olive Street. And the remaining part of the residence would remain as a residential unit. The discretionary application requested is to allow a medical cannabis dispensary permit to be issued for under Section 2880.030 of the Municipal Code. I'm going to ask that you, or first ask staff to make a presentation on what the proposal is, and I'll let you have an opportunity to describe it.
Thank you. Danny Cotto, Senior Planner. So the proposal is at 631 Olive Street, which is one house down from the southwest corner of Ortega and Olive Streets. Here's it's just a vicinity map. Here's Ortega and Olive. North is to the is pointing this way, as you can see, and here is the site. It's the site of an existing house, which is proposed to be half of it converted to a medical marijuana dispensary. There would be a handicap parking space in front, 3 parking spaces in the back. It would maintain a private rear yard. If we look at the site plan, so there'd be an existing driveway that goes back to a parking area, which would be continued, and the required landscaping around parking lots would be in place. Like I said, this is an existing building, and it's proposed to be modified with handicap access and all the building code requirements. So here's the existing house, and this black line here would delineate the dispensary. So you'd enter in the front door to an entry waiting area here. The dispensing room, a separate dispensing room, is required by the ordinance, as is a bathroom for the customers. And then again, there's a surface and break room here, and then locked storage for the storage of the cannabis. And the residence would be maintained much smaller. I can't remember the exact size, but it's in the range of 400 to 500 square feet, I believe, where you'd enter in the back, kitchen, living room, bedroom, and then a bathroom. over here, and they would close off all access between the two. The parking, the project is not requesting any modifications. It meets all the zoning requirements, and it also meets all the requirements of Chapter 2880 of the municipal code, which is the medical marijuana dispensary permit ordinance. There is the staff report. The way we do these staff reports is we don't discuss every single requirement. We only discuss the ones that don't meet the ordinance. But as an attachment, the applicant has put quite an operational plan together that describes how it meets the requirements and how they plan to operate their dispensary. And we've looked through this and we've compared it against the requirements of the ordinance, and we find that it meets all the requirements. There are 9 or 10 criteria for approval, and we discussed those in the staff report. Let's see, actually there's 13 of them. And we believe it meets these criteria. Therefore, we are asking that the staff hearing officer make the findings that are in the staff report and approve the facility.
Okay.
We have received, I believe we received 4 letters. 2 of them you may have already received, one from the Housing Authority, one from Paula Westbury, and we received 2 that were in Spanish. Oh,
No, I don't have the copies of those.
okay.
I think they're upstairs.
Yeah, Julie Rodriguez, the Planning Commission Secretary, showed them to me yesterday, and I asked her to summarize them. Maybe that, obviously that hasn't been done yet, or at least it's not down here yet. I believe they were both in support of this and other medical marijuana facilities, and
They were not from neighbors, or were they?
no, I think they were, but I'll find out.
We can track them down.
Yeah, I'll find out more. Excuse me, if you can call Julie. Thanks.
Okay.
Okay, and the 2 that the Housing Authority letter and the Paula Westbury letter were both in opposition.
Okay.
And I believe Housing Authority is here.
Okay. Why don't I hear from the applicant now, then we'll get to public comment right after that. If you could just expand a little bit about why you selected this site and why you feel it's consistent with our ordinances.
The reason we selected this site, obviously it's within the zone, and along this street there... Oh, I apologize.
Just get a little closer there.
There are quite a few businesses on this street, so we felt that we would fit within, even though it is mixed residential, it's all zoned for commercial or even manufacturing. There's a tile company just here, which is a huge industrial kind of thing. Across the street is the Graphic Traffic, and there are quite a few businesses. Arnaldi's is down on the other end, and the transition house is on the corner. We actually back up to part of the transition house, and this here is the China Bowl. So there's actually huge walls on both ends of the backyard. The front of the house has not been used for years. The owner's mother was going to use it as a real estate office. She's an agent, and she was trying to sell the property when we took over the lease. So we're not actually displacing anybody. This is empty. It's the back part where somebody lives, and he's going to continue to live there. And so this is essentially separated by a firewall already, and he has his own kitchen, bathroom, and everything. The only thing we're changing is that this closet here, pantry closet, become our handicap accessible restroom, and it's all ready to go. We just need to put in the sink there, and it wouldn't change anything. The only thing we're really changing is in the front here. Staff had asked that there be handicap accessibility other than coming in through the driveway where there are cars that are going to be coming in and out, and they might be at a low enough level not to be seen. So essentially, this is just going to be a separate handicap accessible walkway. And the other thing is in the back, there is to get enough parking. It needs to be office retail, so we need 3 spots in the back. There happens to be a shed here which is not in use. It's dilapidated and it's actually being held up by the Morning Glory. So really we're more concerned with saving the Morning Glory than we are with the shed itself. And we would have done that work already if we didn't require a demolition permit or building permit to do that. So we had initially the parking was going to extend to here, but as the requirements 10, 9, and 10, this is all we really need. So what we're going to do is add 4 feet here of planter boxes, and this is all enclosed so that the resident who lives in the rear won't be affected by people driving in and out, and he can even access it from the other side so that he doesn't even need to come down the driveway. And the handicap parking spot is already here in place. It just needs permeable concrete, something that lets the water through but also creates a drive. And so since we're not displacing anybody, I haven't read the letter from the Housing Authority. I don't know what their objection is, but there isn't anybody living in there right now. It's not being used, and so we are...
Right now, there's no one in the house?
There hasn't been anyone in the house for the 6 months or even 2 years
you
prior.
indicated someone would remain living there?
Oh yeah. In the rear there is a resident.
Okay, someone's
So
living
he's
there.
been there and is staying there.
Okay,
So it's just the front of the house that is not in use.
okay.
And the only other, I think, this fence here is 3 feet. Prior it was kind of tough to see coming out of here, and it seemed a little bit
You're
dangerous.
going to correct it to lower it?
It's already corrected.
Okay.
The fence was falling apart, and now it's 3 feet from here to here, and the rest of it is going to be 6 feet. The only other thing is this fence here, which is already somewhat in place and just needs to be filled in for privacy.
Okay.
And the washer and dryer to be covered, and that's pretty much it.
Mr. Moon?
Yes.
I forgot to mention that this plan, the security plan and the whole operational plan has been reviewed by both us and the police department and found to be adequate. I would ask Mr. Graham to, for the benefit of us and the audience, to talk about the operation and how you would fit in with the neighborhood and make sure that this operation does not adversely impact your neighbors.
Yeah, I had spoken with the neighbors immediately to either side, and I think those are the letters probably that are in Spanish, and they seem totally supportive of it. I haven't actually spoken with anyone who didn't support it. I didn't speak with the business owners in the area. I wasn't really concerned with them. It was more just, are we going to upset the people who live around here? And so far, just from being out there and cleaning the place up, everybody that has come by has seemed to be happy that we're improving on the property. It's a very old house, as the historic review shows, and most likely anyone who would purchase this property would probably demo the house completely and just try and put in something else to take advantage of the fact that you could put another structure here in the back. It's zoned for it, and it would probably maximize it as far as usable space. But we don't want to alter it in any way. We want the house to look just as it is, historic. We don't want to even take down this shed, except that it is so dilapidated that it's probably going to fall over on its own. And The only thing that we have changed is just cleared out some of the brush and things that just to satisfy the ordinance requirement that the police be able to drive by and look in the front without landscaping being in the way. They want to be able to see what's going on in there. So it's going to be fairly transparent, the operation. There's the waiting room as you come in that you can see into from the windows. And then this is the dispensing room here. And then this is all the back room, break area. And so really it's going to be pretty quiet. People are going to come in, park in the back, come up to the front. There won't be any sort of loitering. There is no lounge or anything. There's nothing to do there except for go in, get checked in, receive medication, and leave. And so the street has high traffic in certain times of the day, and it's a situation where Olive Street thins out for a couple blocks, and so it is kind of hard for vehicles to pass each other because a lot of the time the tile company will have giant trucks that are unloading pallets and forklifts and things like that. So there are times of the day where it's a busy street, but I don't think we're going to add to any of the traffic since we have our own parking, and we'll probably discourage people from coming during the hours when they're offloading those giant trucks, just for safety.
Could I ask a couple more questions? So the hours of operation?
10 to 8 for now. We had planned to close one day, ideally Sunday, but we may find that a lot of the patients can only come on a Sunday, so we may find, if that is allowed, that we decide later to close on, say, a Monday or day of the week.
Okay, well, I have...
But we aren't going to be open in the early morning hours when most of the trucks are there unloading stuff.
And what's the security situation? What are you proposing as far as security guards or cameras?
We would like for this to be the security room here, since it's not any real usable space, but it seems kind of a tight corner, so we would ideally put a counter here with kind of a door here that lifts over, so that the security guard can be here in the waiting room. As you walk in, the first thing you see is security. And then he also has this back here so that we could put a security door here, and if he wanted to, he could be totally enclosed. We don't really like the idea of having a window when you walk in and a security or bulletproof glass, although this door could perhaps have that feature, just in case somebody were to come in threatening or in any way disturbing the business. I would think that the rest of this is adequate waiting area, and since there are going to be at least 6, possibly 8 cameras, there's one that records anyone who walks in their face, and another one directly inside that also records them. The camera out here is going to see any car that comes in. Will record the license plate, and in case there are any problems. As soon as they get back here, there's another camera that monitors the whole parking area, and then within the shop there are cameras in the dispensing room and also here in the waiting room. So there's really nowhere on the property that won't be monitored by camera, and the security guard here will be looking at. Part of his job is going to be to take a few moments throughout the day just to go outside and make sure that nobody's loitering. Also keeping the street clear of people. We don't want anybody coming with a patient, waiting in the car, and just being out on the street. Not that that's illegal. It just we're trying to discourage anything like that. If you're coming into the dispensary, ideally you're coming in here, parking in the back by yourself, unless of course you're a caregiver for someone who needs help. And I don't foresee any security problems. The whole house is going to have an alarm system, and this will be the only room at night that was storing anything, which won't be all that much. And I don't see any problems with security. It's pretty small.
Okay, and what about access? One concern that I heard at Planning Commission, at City Council yesterday and at other previous meetings is access by minors or access in general. How do you let people in your facility?
Well, as soon as you come in, there's a security guard waiting to meet you. And so unless you have a doctor's recommendation, you won't be waiting in this area. It will be sort of, you go. The only reason to be waiting is if your paperwork was being processed, and unless you had a fake prescription that was being verified, that would be the only few minutes that even a minor would be. I mean, we could keep the door locked and not allow anyone to walk in until they've been verified, but I don't see anything occurring between here and here that a security guard wouldn't be able to deal with right away. It's just a matter of, do you have your recommendation or not?
There is not a requirement to have a secured entry with, buzzing type of, to let them in, right? So
No,
This door is going to be like that, so that you
Okay,
can't
but not the
access the
entrance to the
dispensing
facility,
room.
right?
The
Is
only
that what
thing-
you were getting at, to try to prevent people from
well,
getting
I was
into the space?
I was just wondering what the plan was. I know
Okay.
that the requirement of the ordinance is that there will be a separate secure dispensing room, but one of the issues that has come up at the 500 North Milpas dispensary was, a concern by the neighbors that high school kids or junior high kids would somehow be able to loiter around or get in and be able to conduct some illicit activity perhaps, or
Okay.
If I'm not mistaken, that's a much larger area at the Milpas, maybe 7,000 square feet or something.
No, it was quite a small one as well.
Oh, it's not the. I'm thinking of the 300 Milpas.
Right.
Okay. As far as minors accessing it, I don't imagine there could be any problem with them coming into the waiting room, just like any pharmacy or doctor's office. I can't imagine any trouble would come from someone. Even a minor entering a liquor store would immediately be told, if they didn't have identification, that they would have to leave. We'd be happy to revise it if you think there needs to be something else there, but I think
No, I think the questions that staff was asking is just to give the benefit to the public as to what type of security measures that you're providing, so they're aware of it, so if they have questions relative to that problem,
Right.
that you have an understand of their concern.
I see.
And I was more interested also in to establish if that requirement has been applied. It doesn't seem to have been applied elsewhere, right? A secured front entry door.
Correct.
And then I also had a related question with respect to the security guard. Is the security guard something you offer, or is it part of a requirement to the security plan?
There is a security plan required. It doesn't. I don't think the ordinance.
I
actually
just read it. It
requires
doesn't say security guard.
Security guard.
So
but-
this is something you're offering.
Right. but most of the-
I know that in the ordinance it doesn't say specifically that you have to have a licensed security guard, although with the city council meeting yesterday, where they're planning to review the ordinance, most likely I believe they're going to add a provision that the security guard be a licensed security guard and not just somebody wearing a shirt that says security. But
Okay.
we plan to do that anyway, so
And-
if that comes up.
For the 500 North Milpas dispensary, that was a requirement, a condition of approval put on by the staff hearing officer to have a licensed security guard and not just someone. I would probably recommend something like that here.
All right, well, we'll get into that a little bit more. But before we do that, did you have any more questions before we get into public comment? Okay, I will open public comment at this time and allow the public to come forward and identify yourself and speak to the matter. If you can come forward.
Do we have
Do you have
Laura,
request
do we have
slips? Or
requests to speak?
why don't we just take turns? Here. Please identify yourself and
My name is Pam Johnston. My husband, John Johnston, and I own the Japanese house at 521 Olive Street. So I really have just 3 points to make, so I'll be brief. The first point is that marijuana is a most abused drug. Whether it's administered for medicinal purposes or sold on the streets, it's abused. And we have personal experience through my son, who had a friend who obtained, had a medical permit, obtained marijuana, and then shared it among his friends. He was a minor. He was in high school. So my personal issue with this is that this location will attract abusers. It will attract crime. It's in a residential area that's dark at night where there's already a significant issue with drugs. We recently remodeled our house, and for the entire year, our contractors told us regularly in the streets around our property and on those blocks, there are constant drug transactions taking place. And it's going to take a bad situation, in my opinion, only make it worse. And it's right in the middle of a high school location and a junior high school location. So that's my first point. My second point is that the city is making a tremendous investment using significant tax dollars, of which I'm a major contributor, to implement low-income housing units and to extend the transition house in this area. And the purpose behind these investments is to give people a second chance, which I think is extremely important. So my husband and I have always been very supportive of these efforts. My question is, we're giving people a helping hand, and then at the same time we're creating an environment that will put them more at risk. This is akin, in my opinion, to putting a halfway house of sexual offenders next to the daycare center at the transition house. It's like you can't have it both ways. You're either going to help people and create an environment for them and help us get a return on our investment as taxpayers for these people, or you're not. And there's one way that's already been established and the investment's already been made. So let's not poison that investment by doing something that could alter it in a significant way. Then finally, my last point is, I don't have any issue with the use of marijuana for medicinal purposes. I can certainly understand why people would need it. But I think that if you insist on having such a facility in Santa Barbara, then why make this a dirty little secret in the back neighborhood of the low-income, largely residential, mostly poor neighborhood, where, it could hurt people who are already challenged? I feel like if you're going to do this, locate it in a professional medical building. Hold yourself to the same standards as pharmacists. If somebody came in here and said, I want to open up a pharmacy at 631 Olive Street, and, I promise I'll have security. Well, security requires judgment. You have to turn on the alarm. You have to make sure that things are functioning properly. And mistakes are made. We have cameras around our property. You can forget to set the alarm. It's not fail-proof. And, and my big issue here is that it's dark, it's not safe. Put it in a professional building where it's lit, it's secure, hours in parking can be controlled, and most important, fundamentally, is that there are people there who are responsible and can be observant of inappropriate conduct and traffic and will regulate what's happening. There's no regulation that's going to occur with a bunch of residential, poor, low-income people on a dark street at 631 Olive Street. It's going to be 100% entirely up to this individual to make sure it happens and happens the way it's supposed to happen. And my feeling is my confidence level is very low based on the presentation I just heard, and the risk is too great based on the people in that area and the investment that's been made. So my husband and I strongly oppose this and think it's a huge mistake.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
May I hear from Amelia Botello? Botello, come forward. Hi.
Hi. My name is Amelia Botello. I'm working for Transition House for 11 years. I'm totally opposing this. If you want to do something that is going to be beneficial for the people, why you have to do it on that way? Why don't you do it in a medical building with everybody is aware of that, it's legal, and the it's very clear that this is not for people that really need. This is for the juveniles, people that can get this marijuana legal. I'm very upset for the government to allow in these places. They already know that this is not going to be for people that really need. It's for somebody that can have that and smoking on the street with the permit in front of the police officer and not getting a ticket because they have the car. You know, if this is for a very good cause, I will support that and I will be working with those people. But because I know this is not for a good cause, it's for them to make money, easy money. So I'm not agreeing with that, and especially because it's very dark, it's very dangerous for our clients. I walk around 8, 9 o'clock at night from the shelter to the offices, and I'm too scared. So I'm going to be more scared to have the place over there.
Okay, thank you. May Barbara Allen step forward?
Good morning. My name is Barbara Allen. I am speaking today as the chair of the Housing Authority Commission. One of the missions of the Housing Authority is to provide safe housing for our tenants. As you know, the city has recently made a huge investment for our property on the corner of Olive and Coda Street, which will house emancipated youth in large numbers. I have grave concerns by that population being there, and I think they're very vulnerable to the people who tend to congregate, if you like, at these dispensaries. I know they don't congregate outside their doors, but traditionally we've watched on Milpa Street, and they go down several blocks, which would put us right at Artisan Court stores, and not only that, at Transition House. I think that the locations need to be studied, and I don't know what happened at the City Council meeting yesterday, but I believe they were going to consider it, going back to the Ordinance Committee to consider locations where these dispensaries can be located throughout the city. And I would just urge you to maybe put this project on hold to see how the City Council comes out with the investment that they're putting into low-income housing in that area. I shudder to think that we may be compromised in this situation. Thanks for your consideration.
Thank you. I have Kathleen Bosch.
It's Boschke, thank you.
Boschke, sorry.
Thank you, good morning. My name is Kathleen Boschke. I'm the Executive Director of Transition House. We are a homeless shelter for families with children, and we have facilities located on both ends of this block. Our shelter at 434 East Ortega, our infant care center, programming space, and offices and apartment units on the corner of Olive and Coda Street. And we certainly provide some foot traffic to the neighborhood back and forth between shelter residents coming over to use our office facilities and then going back in the evenings. At about any given time in our shelter, about 40 of the residents are under the age of 18, and included in our client base are those who are involved in recovery programs and who are attempting to overcome substance abuse disorders. While I certainly respect that the dispensary complies to local zoning laws, my experience in the work that I've done for many years with homelessness has shown me that there is indeed widespread abuse of medicinal marijuana, especially locally amongst gang members and others who obtain prescriptions and the substance only to turn around and sell it to others. It's not hard to get a prescription for medicinal marijuana. This isn't the fault of the dispensary operator at all, and I'm not questioning how he would operate the dispensary, but it is a widely understood occurrence in a program that is not yet fully and properly regulated, as our City Council is continuing to discuss. I think it's important for you all to know that individuals who are in recovery want and need to be removed from circumstances where drugs or alcohol abuse are taking place. They don't want to be around it. The activity can seriously undermine their recovery. And certainly we have worked constantly with the youth in our shelter trying to protect them from gang activity as very low-income members of the community. Often they've lived in east side or west side neighborhoods where they've had problems with gangs. They're trying to get on the right path as are their parents. And an influx of additional street foot traffic by other gang members or people that don't use medicinal marijuana in the way that it should be used would be detrimental to what their families are trying to do. And so I'm not in support of the dispensary at this location. I might also add, yes, our building does back up to the property, but the operator has never come to speak with Transition House about how our operations work or what the concerns might be between the two. I would echo the other two speakers or three speakers and just simply say that I don't have a problem with dispensing of medicinal marijuana. I have had friends with cancer who have benefited from it, but I think it should be in an area where medical services are provided around Cottage Hospital, Sampson Clinic, and the like, but not where you have such vulnerable populations as ours. So thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker is, let's see, I think
Skip might be.
okay. Skip, do you have? Why don't you come on up?
I don't believe I need to reiterate what's in our letter and what the previous speakers have said. What I would like to add is that the Housing Authority owns numerous properties in that area, and we do have a very vulnerable population. I, too, do not object to a dispensary per se, if it's properly regulated, but I do object to this particular location. We have had direct experience with a dispensary on West Victoria Street, directly across from a Housing Authority project. The medical cannabis was dispensed at the dispensary. People would walk across the street and sell to our residents, which were youth. So the same thing with alcohol or pills, drugs, whatever. You can regulate where it's sold. Once it leaves there, it's out of our control. This is a sensitive area, and we oppose its application.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. And I have one last speaker, Elias Espinosa.
Morning. Morning.
Morning.
How's it going? I'm in favor of it. I live next door. If my mother was alive, she would use it, which she did. And there's a lot of, I have lived there all my life, by the way, at 627 and Halfwell, right next door to the place. Like I say, I'm in favor. I've seen a lot of changes go through that whole area. And I've seen a lot of retired people, a lot of sick retired people who would benefit from it from around that neighborhood. I mean, a lot of them. They could just walk there and get their medicine. So I'm in favor of it.
Anything else?
I guess that's it.
Okay, thank you. And I just want to note for the record that there were several letters submitted. One in Spanish that supporting another location as well as any other location, citing needs for medical reasons for those seeking treatment. And that was submitted by Isabel Castaneda. And another, this is probably dealing with another location at 500.
You know what? These are
This one's or other.
I
so these are
apologize,
for
yeah.
500. This
We'll
is
take
another.
the support anyway, even if it's not for
Okay.
us.
And then obviously we have another letter that from the Housing Authority objecting to the application, and it's been submitted for our review, citing the location and the proximity to other vulnerable other residential developments, and the need to have the zoning ordinance reevaluated regarding the potential dispensary locations. So thank you for those comments. So I will close public comment this time, and the matter is referred. I do have some questions for you and staff, so I'd like to go through those questions before we make a decision. I read the staff report, went through the issue with respect to security, and it's quite detailed as far as trying to set this up, a facility up to get security cameras in place and so forth. But I'm interested in the number of patients expected, the degree of volume that would be expected for this site, and in order for it to be a profitable or acceptable sort of.
Since it is a non-profit, really all it has to do is pay the rent and utilities and the salaries of the people that are working there.
Okay.
And there will be volunteers, so even the salary is fairly low.
Okay.
So it doesn't have to do a huge amount of volume. As far as I know, there are already 2 dispensaries on Milpas, and there's one on Haley that is, I think, legal until 2011, and another one a few blocks over next to State Street that is also permitted till 2011. So for the next few years, I don't imagine there will be all that much traffic, especially if another project gets approved, I believe on Chapala Street, that is going to be a larger facility.
So what it's sort of implying depends on the number of facilities, really, because if you have more facilities, there'll be
Right.
diluted
If there's
among
only
other-
one facility for every 30,000 people, then yeah, it would probably become fairly busy. But as it is, there are quite a few, and it seems as though they're fairly regional, that the patients that frequent them are patients that live close by, and I don't expect in this neighborhood, since it's not really a storefront facility, it's going to have to be sort of people that are going to find it are the ones that are specifically looking for it. And
So would you, let's say you begin the operation, and the expectation would be, would be it unreasonable to have less than 100 visits per day, or would it be
for sure there's going to be less than 100 visits per day.
in the range estimating?
Possibly 5 years from now that could change, but
Okay.
we're not
Just trying
doing
to
any
get a sense.
advertising. The only way to find us would be from a list that maybe a doctor has, or online if you're looking specifically for providers. So it's not going to be
Well, I think what I'm getting at is the idea of there's concerns in the neighborhood about nuisances, and nuisances associated with the number of the traffic involved and maybe the attraction. And I was just trying to get a sense of.
Yes, I
what
believe
would
that it will be much less of an impact than, say, the tile company a couple doors down that gets a huge amount of traffic daily, not just for deliveries, but
Okay.
Same with graphic traffic across the street.
And then I'd like to have staff to just give a little quick reporting on the status of facilities and how this relates to what's going on in the city. I just think that would be helpful for me to understand how many facilities there are. And
Okay, there's one legal facility at 331 North Milpas. That's the only facility that's gone through our process, got approval, and opened. There's another one at 500 North Milpas, which went through our process, but which is under appeal to the Planning Commission, so they have not opened. There are 4 non-conforming facilities, and those were in existence prior to the adoption of the current ordinance, and they are at 3128 State, 3516 State, 27 Parker Way, and 100 East Haley. And some of those are even under dispute. We're not sure that they have all maintained their non-conforming status. And we have enforcement letters out to some of those. And then we have 3 pending. This one We have one at 741 Chapala Street, which is in the Paseo Chapala building, and one at 2 West Mission. Those are the only ones that are legal or non-conforming. Everything else that we hear of or know of are not legal. And just so you know, from a conversation I had with the police department yesterday, the police department will be tracking down the illegal ones and enforcing on them.
Okay. I also wanted to ask a question having to do with its employees, because in your business plan, you said 3 to 6 employees. Now, employees would also be volunteers. Is that what you were thinking?
Just in case there happen to be volunteers that would push it over, we expect to only need 3 employees
at one time to
at
operate
any
the
one
facility.
time. But since you're not really allowed to even be there unless you're either a patient or an employee, we wanted to allow for being able to have volunteers for whatever may arise in the future. And everyone has to go through a background check as far as the ordinance, including volunteers. So,
Okay.
And I assume the security guard has its own background check.
Okay. Well, we'll get to that issue. But the other question related to was operational hours. Again, I looked at your operational plan, and it said 10 to 7, and then you mentioned 10 to 8.
I
So are
apologize,
there any...
It's 10 to 7. We revised it so that it wouldn't be dark.
So it's 10 to 7.
10 to 7, yes.
Okay. And then there are no hour limits?
Correct.
Technically, so, okay. And then I was interested in citing a condition here that says alcoholic beverages shall be not consumed on premises under a specific section of the ordinance. And I was just wanting to hear from staff about that. Typically is when you have a commercial facility, but if you have a residential facility, does that just entail, I mean, how is that enforced with respect to residences living there? I mean,
Well, to be honest, it wasn't quite envisioned that you'd be in a mixed-use building like this. It's not. The purpose of that requirement is not to say that. Well, it says that you can't sell it, right? Sell or consume.
No, it says consumed.
Yeah, it was not meant for the residents, which is completely separate. It's really meant for. The idea behind that was the council did not want this type of establishment to become like a hangout place, like a bar or even a liquor store, just to have, it's supposed to be more akin to a pharmacy than anything else.
Okay. And then I wanted to talk a little bit about signage. You had mentioned that you're not going to advertise this yet. I think there's some allowances for signage, some minimal window signage that live with the sign.
Yeah, if the signage would have to comply with the sign ordinance.
That's the intent behind that
Yeah.
limitation. That you are, in the business plan, you say you don't propose any signage at
I
this
don't
time.
think we're even going to need a sign.
Okay.
We have to put a larger address, illuminated,
Right.
and it's more of a destination. I mean, people that are going to be coming here know where they're going, and
Okay. So I'm interested in possibly placing a condition saying you don't advertise on the site with a sign.
Yeah,
And,
that's fine.
Even though you offer it, I think what I would like to see is that it not be
Sure.
proposed as
Yeah, I don't
something that
think
would
that's going
attract
to be an issue.
attention. Okay. And okay, I wanted to talk to the physical improvements necessary for this conversion to take place. You mentioned that there was already a separation between the residential space and the commercial space.
Yes, this has in the past been altered. There's a couple conflicting plans on file.
Okay.
Where there used to be a deck here and some.
Okay, what I'm interested in hearing is, my understanding is there has not been a change of occupancy, change of use to occur at this pace.
That it would occur if this.
They're proposing it.
They're proposing
That
it.
we don't
yes.
have a legal change of use right now, dissecting this up right now. It's not a current mixed use.
No.
Even though physically it might have been used that way.
Right. Physically, it's already separated.
Okay.
And there are 2 addresses, 631 and 633, which
Okay.
doesn't necessarily mean that this is 631 and this is 633, but that's how I take it, being existing as it is, this has not been in use for a long time and was, I believe, going to be the office for the...
Okay, I just wanted to get an understanding of whether there had been some alterations that had occurred to the building already. And then the last question I have to do with the site layout. There are several conditions of approval you're aware of in our staff report for the project. Those are part of this approval if we do approve the site, so you have to be aware and accept those conditions. And one of the conditions is that you go through the ABR process for any exterior alterations that you propose. I would think that you're going to require some improvements that are necessary to be reviewed. And my understanding, since they were minor in nature, they didn't go to the ABR first. So you're going to be going to the ABR.
Yeah,
possibly.
I think we've already submitted that, and it's in the works.
In the works.
Yeah.
So I would like to make sure that that condition is very specific with respect to a landscape plan being required, which I think would help. Right now, the condition saying the project is subject to review and approval by the ABR. I would like to have you be aware that a landscape plan improvement would be a requirement, that landscape plan be reviewed to primarily improve the appearance of the structure and also buffer it from the adjoining properties. I think since there's a new parking area in the back, we would like to make sure there's a landscape plan.
Yes, in fact, I think that's already been submitted with the planter boxes and native plants.
By a landscape architect.
Yeah, and this is at least a 20-foot wall as well as this. And so the only neighbors that can even see this property are here and here.
Well, I've seen some of the photos, so I think you're going to have to embellish it a little bit to screen it. So I think that's what the ABR's role would be.
Gotcha.
Okay. So now let's get to the fundamental question of the use and the location, which I think is my purview to decide. And I'm quite aware of the controversy associated with these locations and how there might be a reevaluation of these sites. That may impact your facility still. As I understand it, there's still some discussion that may go forward to the Ordinance Committee and may impact projects under consideration or even approved. That possibly might be the case.
Can I comment on that?
Sure.
One of the concerns was that it should be located in more of a medical pharmacy type area, like
a medical
somebody
office
mentioned Cottage Hospital. And there is, I just saw yesterday, a unit for lease just above from the pharmacy across from Cottage Hospital. Unfortunately, that's not in the zone that is required by the ordinance. And I know Danny personally did a lot of work coming up with the zone, and it's not easy considering there are schools and parks everywhere in the city.
Okay.
And so ideally we would love to be in a medical office. There just aren't any available that happen to fit the zone and also the parking requirements and everything else that goes along with that.
Okay.
And so this wasn't necessarily the first choice of a spot, but it is a mixed-use neighborhood, and it could be even used for manufacturing. And so I think this is less of an impact than some kind of manufacturing facility.
Okay. Okay. What I wanted to do is inform the people, the general public that came today, what my role is as the staffing officer as far as making the appropriate findings, and as contained in our staff report. And it's basically three areas, which is, does this dispensary permit application comply with the limitations on the permitted locations for a dispensary pursuant to the zoning ordinance? And staff has point by point indicated that it does, based on location. Does the dispensary comply with the criteria for the review of these applications? And the criteria, if you look at the staff report, has 13 areas spelled out with respect to what the dispensary has to abide by with respect to the operational plan, the security, the approval by the police department, the requirement that the business plans show that these requirements are being met. And with respect to the location, I did visit the site. I do believe that this is a neighborhood that does have residential uses in close proximity, and it is a transitionary sort of a block. You do have a lot of residential uses on Olive Street, and it does transition on this block to commercial space. So that does make it, I guess, not stand out as much. However, you are proposing it in a residence, a current residence that's going to have a change of use. I could see the concern that people might have about that use. But as it stands today, the locational requirements do not speak to my discretion to determine whether or not it's compatible with the neighborhood. Maybe that should be a criteria in the future, that discretion be given either to the staff hearing officer or city council or the planning commission, similar to a conditional use permit where you're allowed, but you have to request and make a case for why it should be allowed in this particular location in this zoning. Currently, we do not have that discretion. So I'm bound by the fact that you've made an application and shown consistency with all the requirements and the criteria set forth. The only thing close to that would be if there are significant issues or problems anticipated or resulted. And I'm thinking anticipated would be hard to gauge if you were to try to establish that locational limitations on where these facilities are allowed, anticipated that would be a safer location if they were distanced. I happen to believe there might be a greater distance requirement that should be applied, but that's not the case. You are complying with the current regulations, which speak to the 500 feet limits and so forth. So as a result, the other conclusion would be, will they result? And it's my understanding that we can revoke these permits if there is a problem that is recognized that exists. And that is, I guess, the safe measure that we can use to say this isn't a location that has worked out. So at this moment, I think I understand the concerns of the neighborhood and the locational concerns that may arise, but I believe that there are provisions in place that would allow us to revoke it if there appears to be a problem, and the police do monitor these for that enforcement. So I'm going to conclude that this dispensary does comply with our zoning ordinance and criteria spelled out in the zoning ordinance, but it is conditioned with the following conditions outlined in the staff report under Exhibit A. I'm going to modify two conditions. The Condition 2, Condition 3, which it's subject to review approval, but that their landscape plan also be submitted for that approval. I'm going to add a condition that the security guard that you provide be a licensed security guard, similar with whatever language that we've required on other property, other proposals. And then finally, that there not be a sign proposed to advertise the facility. That your commitment to not propose would be now a condition that you don't provide that. I don't think it's necessary. People will understand where these facilities are, and I think it would also attract attention if to folks that or people that should not be loitering in the area.
Mr. Limon, if you might think about adding another condition as the hours of operation.
Sure. If that is consistent with our understanding that it would be from 10 to 7 p.m.?
Yes,
those are the hours
corrected.
that...
we had revised it 10 to 7, that's correct.
And we'll add that as a condition number 10. Do you have any questions with respect to those conditions?
No.
Okay. So your project is approved. Continue on to design review. This decision is appealable to within 10 days, so they can go forward. If there might be, you might want to consider that with your timing of your review process, because that might affect whether we allow it to move forward if there's an appeal filed. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for coming. That concludes the staff hearing, officer hearing, and the meeting is adjourned.